Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to visit overhead costs in a little bit more detail. We've talked quite a bit about labor and materials, but now we're going to go ahead and talk about overhead. So let's go ahead. One of the main things is that what actually goes into overhead. What are the costs that are included in this particular square? And it's really everything that isn't direct labor or direct materials. So one of the things we define as direct is things that are touched labor, so people who touch the product. And then direct materials are materials that go into the product. Now, there's a bunch of different categories of overhead that are not, or costs, I mean, that are not direct labor and direct materials. And I've put some of them here. The selling, general, and administrative expense. And then overhead is broken up into indirect materials, other expense, and indirect labor. So it's when we look at these particular all these expense categories, these are actually included in the allocation of overhead, in that the things we've been talking about. This is not. It is kept separate. And if you look sometimes on the annual reports, you'll see selling, general, and administrative expenses. So those are separate. Now the next question is, well, where do each of these things go? How do we know? So I have all of these different expenses listed, and these are all expenses that are not direct labor and not materials. So direct labor are the people who are like working on the machines or assembling the product, and direct material is the raw material that goes into the particular item. So all of these other categories, what I'm going to do is we're going to go through of them and talk about why they go into different categories. So rent, it goes into the overhead category that is allocated to the product, and it's in that other expense area. So this is the reason is because this is really quite necessary, really important in producing the product. It's very close to the production of the product. Interest expense, though, goes to this in this category, selling, general, and administrative expense, because it's more of a corporate expense. It's more of something that's not directly attributable to a particular product. Depreciation, again, that's depreciation on the machinery. It goes into other expense because you need that machinery in order to do the product. Accounting, so the costs associated with the accounting department or any other overhead, any other corporate department, that stays in this general category. Advertising, again, general selling and administrative expense, so that's why the advertising is part of selling expense. President's salary, so that high level corporate kinds of expenses stays in that area. The maintenance on machines, that goes into the other category of overhead. The supervisor salary, this is an example of indirect labor. So would say salaries from the quality control department, support departments that directly support the production of the product. Insurance, that goes into this other category. Sales force salary, again, that's a high level, that's the selling expense. There are some direct materials, like indirect materials, like machining oil. You can't actually attribute which part of that oil went into which product, but it is very closely associated with the manufacturing. Fasteners, things like screws and nails, those are hard to keep track of, so we just put them all into this indirect materials, which are then also allocated to the product. So once we've gathered all of the expenses associated with the overhead, the question then is, how do we allocate all of those expenses to each product? The simplest way we do it is we take and add up all of the costs for the year. So rent, insurance, we just add them all up. And then we take that, it's as an easy method, is we just divide it over the production per year. How many parts did we produce in each year? And that gives us $1 per unit of overhead costs. Now that's the easiest way. Later on in the quarter, or the next couple of weeks, we're also going to be looking at a more complex way, which is activity-based costing. But the easy way is just to do it this way. So as an example, let's say all of these expenses added up to $25,000 a year, and we produced 5,000 parts, which is then $5 a part. Now you can see that this is easy if all the parts are the same. But what if some of the parts were large and complex and some of them were small and very simple? Allocating $5 for every single part might not be an equitable way of attributing the overhead. And that's why later on we'll talk about this activity-based costing.